to look over this video as well. So Plato, who lived in 429-347 BCE, a long time ago, he's an Athenian of high status, and that's important, especially in the context of the Apology, as you will see in a moment, because he came from the class which had a power. And however, in the Apology, you will see that Socrates, who is his master, and who is his main character, and who is probably the most beloved character in all of Plato's dialogues, is someone who acts against the status quo, if I want to put it this way. In the dialogues themselves, we will talk about various questions. Probably the most important one is what is the good life, but there are other questions as well. What is virtue? How can virtue be taught? How is a human being to act within a society in which he does not agree with the law, for example, and so on. He is also famous for the theory of the forms and the aporetic character of his writing, and what that means is that the early dialogues themselves do not end with an answer, but the dialogues do not answer the question that is raised from the beginning. This is important for Plato. He does not do it because he does not have the answer, or it doesn't matter whether he has the answer or not, but rather the writings themselves are for him a tool to engage his audience. And engaging his audience, he is trying to ask them questions, to make them open their minds to new ideas, and by opening their minds to new ideas, perhaps to find an answer within themselves. We will discuss this problem more and more once we read the text. But today, let's talk a little bit about the Apology. You know by now that the first question that from which the Apology starts is what it is to be an accomplished speaker. You know the context. It is a trial. Socrates is accused in that trial, and the majority, or the large part, actually the whole thing, if I were to consider it correctly, of the Apology is his own defense. It's not an apology in what we may understand today an apology to mean. So he doesn't ask for forgiveness in any way, but it's rather a legal term that designates his defense in the trial. It is important, however, that the whole dialogue begins with this question: what is it to be an accomplished speaker? Because whenever someone says something, in principle, we would assume that that person says the truth. But at the same time, when someone speaks, that person can embellish his speech with various devices, or by using various devices can embellish his speech in such a way that the speech itself becomes attractive. So, the question, what is it to be an accomplished speaker, asks in a way whether an accomplished speaker is someone who tells the truth, or is someone who expresses the truth in embroidered and beautiful phrases, or someone who speaks just in beautiful phrases. So I'm fairly certain that all of us are mesmerized by various speeches because they are beautiful, and we no longer pay attention to what actually is the content of the speech, but rather the beauty of the speech seduces us so much that we are going to believe the speaker regardless of what he or she says. And for Plato and for Socrates, of course, this was important. And it was important especially because of the accusations that were brought against him. In the context of the Apology, we have to remember that the two camps of intellectuals, well, the two camps at that moment were between the Sophists and the Philosophers. And the Sophists were known to be wonderful speakers. The Sophists sophistry began in Athens with the democracy, because if we have democracy, then you also have voting. If you have voting, you have to convince your audience to vote for you. And because of that, you have to have wonderful speeches. And that's how you convince people. You do not necessarily have to tell them the truth, as I'm sure the majority of us know, but what you have to tell them are wonderful speeches so they can put the vote on you. Do not understand that in Greece you have the same kind of democratic system as we may have today. Of course not. However, their system of democracy implied that people had speeches in the arena, so people can hear them and can follow them and put them into office, if I were to put it this way. So, What are the accusations? First, Socrates makes the worse appear the better cause, and then he studies all things in the sky and below the earth and does not believe in gods. And a very important one, corrupts the youth by introducing new gods and charges fees for education. I will refer especially to the third one because it is important in our context. What does it mean to corrupt the youth by introducing new gods? The accusation itself came because of the way in which Socrates behaved. Imagine a guy who is not necessarily well dressed, but who goes from market to market and listens to people having speeches. Imagine at the same time that those people who have speeches are the Sophists, who want to have students. So, you have the Sophists in the market giving speeches. And then Socrates comes. And in the presence of other people, especially young people, he's asking the Sophist questions. By asking questions, as we will see in the next dialogues, he makes them contradict themselves. But if you contradict someone in public, that person will feel bad. He will not enjoy the fact that he will probably lose students, first of all, and he will also lose face in the face of many people. It doesn't mean that he would get upset with himself, but of course, as we all do, because we are humans, they get upset with the person who shamed him. So Socrates will be accused that he corrupts youth, he corrupts the young people, not necessarily because he puts bad ideas into their mind and so on, but rather because by challenging the people who teach the youth, opens the young people towards different ideas that they may find themselves. You have the story of the oracle. I'm jumping over things because I'm hoping that you would read the text itself. I'm just trying to point to several important things. So Socrates finds out from the oracle that he is the wisest human being. And he is at the same time a believer that he's not the wisest human being. Think of it logically. The oracle says, God says Socrates is the wisest, because through the oracle the God speaks, right? God, of course, does not lie. And Socrates, who is in a trial, must say that God does not lie regardless of what he believes. Because, if you remember, he was accused that he was corrupting the youth by introducing new gods. In the trial itself, he will speak about the gods of Athens. He will not speak about new gods. Conclusion, Socrates is, of course, the wisest. However, Socrates, is in his humbleness, says, I know Socrates is not the wisest. I know at the same time God does not lie. So there must be a confusion. Or, in logical terms, an equivocation. Perhaps Socrates is the wisest, may have different meanings. Does it make sense? Now, let me say it again. If you look at the argument itself, you can see that Socrates is the wisest and Socrates is not the wisest cannot be true at the same time. One of them has to be false. I know that I'm not the wisest. I cannot say at the same time that God lies. I would bring accusation upon myself at that moment. So what I'm saying is, well, perhaps what he means whenever he says Socrates is the wisest, it's something else than what people think. So let's try to understand what the God says. And with this, Socrates explains the reason why he goes around and asks people questions and makes a fool of themselves, makes them look like fools. Because he's trying to see, going to the people who are considered the wise human beings in Athens, in what their wisdom consists. So he will go, in my investigation in the service of the God, I found that those who had the highest reputation, he says, were nearly the most efficient, while those who were thought to be inferior were more knowledgeable. Why is that? Because all the people who had knowledge were not, or who were considered to have knowledge, were not able to explain their knowledge. And not being able to explain their knowledge, they show that their wisdom was actually nothing. Socrates, at least, who knows that he does not have wisdom, is better, if I were to put it this way, or is higher than them in wisdom, because he is aware of his lack of wisdom. So what's going to be the reinterpretation of the oracle at the end? The politicians, the poets, the craftsmen, all of them profess, to have some knowledge they do not have. What am I doing? this man among you mortals is wisest, who, like Socrates, understands that his wisdom is worthless. So, in the Apology, if you remember this idea, I think it's important. You have the conflict between two groups of people. One group which claims, in one group people claim they have knowledge, but they prove not to have any when they are asked questions. So they prove they cannot defend their claim for knowledge. And another group, in principle the philosophers, claim that they do not have knowledge, but that the only thing they know is that they do not know anything. But however, while they do not have knowledge, they can realize the contradictions